Okay, so in this lesson in Adobe Premiere Pro, we are going to talk about how to bring in media or clips into an Adobe Premiere project. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Chad, didn't we already do this? Didn't we, I don't know, like lesson 1, talk about how to bring clips into a project by either going in here and going to File, Import, or dragging clips in even, or even going down here and double clicking and opening up the import window and grabbing clips? Wasn't that something we already did? Yes, we did. But we're going to talk about kind of an advanced way to do this, or something that might be more professional or more useful to you as an editor in terms of how you do that. And this is going to be in the media browser. Now, in the media browser, we can look and we can navigate to our home directory and we can find the different drives we have. I'm going to go to my external drive here and look, I have a folder here called Adobe Media Files, and I have a bunch of files that live in here of different purposes. So, for example, we have Goat Media and we have some B-roll in here. And you might remember that you can go in here and you can make a bin, for example, and you can say, let's make a new bin and we're going to call this Goat B-roll. And here, if I'm clicked on the bin, I can go to the media browser and I can just go and click on a couple clips. We'll click on 1, command click on 2, 3, and 4. So we grab all 4 of those clips and I can right click and say import. And that brings in those clips. And actually, since I was clicked on the Goat Media or Goat B-roll bin, it put it in that bin automatically and they're right there. Well, these clips are navigated, and so they are linked to outside files. This is the reference right here to these outside files, but if I go to any one of these files, and I go here and I right-click and I say reveal in Finder, it's going to find it on my external hard drive. So it's in my external hard drive, in Adobe Media Files, in Goat Media, and B-roll, and that's where the clip is located. And that's fine, and that's perfectly acceptable. But here's the thing that may happen. On some occasions, I may have files on my external hard drive, I may have files on my desktop, I may have files in a downloads folder that somebody sent to me in an email that I downloaded, I may have it in a separate file, or maybe an SD card, or maybe my Google Drive, or my Dropbox, and I have files in all kinds of places because, I don't know, maybe I was lazy and I didn't do good media management. Well, what Adobe wants you to do is kind of do good media management, where you take all your files, have it on a drive, have it in a special folder that you have labeled appropriately, and everything is good there. And if you're good at that, fantastic. But if you're not, here's an option. So rather than do this, we're going to get rid of these files. Now, getting rid of these files here, just clicking on them, hitting delete, will not get rid of the original media file. So it's still in here on my hard drive in Adobe Media Files, wherever it's located here. It's still in Adobe Media Files. The files are still there. Just the link reference to them are not there anymore. But if we go to the media browser now, you will see an option here that says, sorry, let me minimize this for a second. You will see an option here that says ingest. And ingest is a way of making copies of these files. So let's talk about what this is going to do. When I check the ingest button, it opens up the ingest settings. And if I don't have the ingest settings here, I can turn the ingest button on. It will open up the ingest settings. But also, I can click this little wrench here next to it to open up the ingest settings. Also, when I first make a project, there's actually a little sprocket that will give me the ingest settings as well. So you'll find that in the project settings. These are project settings right here. You can actually even find them here if you go to File, Project Settings, Ingest Settings right here. You can see the ingest settings. And right now, the ingest settings are doing nothing. It says the action right now for ingest is none. Do nothing. Well, we want to change that. We want to go here and say, when you bring in these files, so when you go File Import, or when you right-click and go Import in the media browser, we can go here and say, we want to make a copy of these files. So now, if they're on my hard drive, it's going to make a copy of them. But where is it going to put that copy? And it makes a copy with something called MD5 verification. That's just a verification thing. It's a little technical, but I don't want to get into it too much. But it just says, hey, I know where this file is, and I have a solid link to this file for where it should be. Well, it says, hey, where do you want to put this copy? So it's going to take these files, and wherever it is, it's going to make a copy of it and put it in a new place. And the new place right now is going to be the same as the project. So I know that this project is on a folder here called Media Ingest. I have a folder right here called Media Ingest, and inside of here is my project called Media Ingest. Fantastic. So in here, I have this Media Ingest file. I'm going to put this in the same place as the project. I'm just going to make a copy of this. Now, when I do this, it says OK here, and I say OK here, and now I have the little checkbox that says, hey, when you import these, don't just import them, and that's a Adobe term, I guess. Adobe says the import is just to bring them in. In this case, we're going to import plus ingest them. Like we're going to swallow them or something. So we're going to ingest them, and when we do that, what we're going to say is, we'll right-click and we'll say import, but the ingest is checked. So now we bring these in. They'll come in automatically, and they came in right here as the MP4s, and if these MP4s are linked automatically still to my hard drive. But here's a special thing. Right now, Adobe Media Encoder is opening. And Adobe Media Encoder is how Adobe is going to make copies of these files. Now, argumentatively, could Premiere make copies of these files? Probably. But no, Adobe Media Encoder is going to come in here and say, I'm going to take over and I'm going to make copies of these 4 files. And it happened relatively quickly. It just said, hey, I'm going to take this file, this file, this file, and this file, these 4 files I grabbed, and I made a copy of them and put them into my Media Ingest folder. And it actually made a subfolder called B-roll, which is just an extra nice thing it did. Now, they did it relatively quickly. Why Premiere doesn't do this itself, I don't know, but it lets Adobe Premiere or lets Adobe Media Encoder do this for you. Now, truth be told, it could probably do it itself, but actually it's probably better if you had a bunch of files. It will transfer them or convert them or copy them in Media Encoder, and you could probably still work in Adobe Premiere. I'm going to close it out for a second, and I'll just show you in A1 now. I can go here and say reveal in Finder. It's not going to link to my external hard drive. It's now going to link to this folder, desktop, Media Ingest, B-roll, A1 there. So this folder right here has a B-roll folder. It made a B-roll folder because it came from a B-roll folder, so I guess it put it in a new B-roll folder. And it put it in here and said A1, A10, A11, A12. It took these files and put them here. So now it's connected to here. And it's right in here in the same place the project. So if you're the kind of person who does stuff where you bring in a bunch of files and they're in all kinds of different places, like I said, your desktop, your downloads folder, an external drive, SD card, God help you. If you put stuff in a bunch of different places, what you should do is you should make copies of them and put them all in the same folder before you even begin your project. Or maybe you have an assistant editor who will help you and do that for you. If you don't, here's what you can do. You can use this media browser ingest setting. And so you can have this be ingested. Now, here's a problem, and here's a thing to be careful of. With this ingest settings, it will make a copy and put the copy in the same place as the project. So it makes a copy with the MD5 verification, whatever that is, and it puts in the same place as the project. If you've already done this, on your own, don't have this checked. Don't have this ingest setting checked, because you don't need to do it again. If you do it again, it's going to open up Media Browser again and just make another copy in a special place. If you've already handled the media management, leave this off. That's fine. So that's a thing you can do to kind of avoid any of those problems where you have files all over the place. I used to work with a guy who had files in 20 different places, and I just had, hey, I need to take these files and copy them to one location and handle them that way. So that's what that will do. Now, there's some other options in the Media Ingest that I want to talk about. And here's the thing that's happening in the world right now. You are bringing in media from all kinds of different things. There are different formats and there are different codecs. So for example, if we go here and we say, let's bring in this A1, or let's go to one of these files A1, and if we went here and looked at A1 here and said, in this GOAT file, this is an MP4 file. And if we go to media file properties, I just right-clicked and chose media file properties, and I look at this, it says in the media file properties, this is an MPEG movie, it's an MP4, so it's an MPEG movie, 1920 by 1080, 23.976 frames per second, audio, it's at 48 kilohertz, 32-bit, cool, it's there, it's in Rec 709, and it's using the H.264 codec at 4:2:0. You can learn all about that if you want to study about codecs. But here's the truth. A lot of video is coming in a lot of different ways right now. There's a number of different formats. So there's QuickTime movies, there's MP4s, there's AVIs, there's MTSs. There are the proprietary formats like Blackmagic B-RAW or other things like that. There's MXF. Well, one of the things that happens with this is that Premiere is trying to read all these different formats and try to work with all these different formats, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily like them. I was working with a client recently, and in their timeline, they had some QuickTime movies and some AVIs. And so it was like a video that was a QuickTime movie and then an AVI, and then a QuickTime movie and an AVI, and a QuickTime movie and an AVI. And it was like, I don't know, it was kind of like reading in different languages. Like if you had a book that was written in a bunch of different languages and you had to read each different paragraph as a different or each different sentence as a different language, you might get choked up sometime or stumble or, get caught in your words because now you're speaking in French and then you're speaking in Spanish and then you're speaking in German and then you're speaking in French and then you're speaking in Spanish and German and you're like, man, my accent is doing terrible because I keep jumping from one language to another. Well, I was working with this client who's working with QuickTime Movies and AVIs, and halfway through the sequence, things started to lag and the audio went out of sync. And it didn't show up as a sync error. It was just like the audio wasn't playing back at the same speed as the video. And Premiere was just like, this is a lot of different types of files and formats. So what people will do sometimes is they'll go through the process of converting all their footage to the same format. So they'll say, hey, I like QuickTime Movies. I'm going to take my AVIs and convert them to QuickTime Movies. And MXF is a perfectly good format, but I'm going to convert to a QuickTime Movie. And those MP4s, they're heavily compressed. I don't like them being so compressed, especially stuff like people will bring in stuff off of iPhone or a GoPro, those little GoPro extreme sport cameras. They'll bring stuff in from different formats. They'll say, hey, I've got this footage from all these different formats. I needed to convert it to something that works the same all the time to make Premiere happy. And what I want to do is I want to make Premiere happy. This process is a process known as transcoding. So we're going to do this again. So I'm going to get rid of A1 through 4. I'll delete it here, which again, deleting it here doesn't delete the actual file that it was referencing. The files are still here in my folder that I made. Now I have a copy of these on my hard drive, so I'm going to delete these as well and to trash these and get rid of them. Cool, I can even trash this B-roll folder itself. Goodbye, that's gone. Amazing. Everything is great. I'm going to go here into the media browser, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to choose in this ingest settings, rather than copy, I'm going to choose transcode. Now transcode gives us some new options. In the primary location, you can put in a special location. You could choose your own location if you want to. Here, choose location. You can make it, put in a special drive, a special place where you put all your media files. I don't know, something you want to do like there. But now we can transcode using what's called a preset. And the presets, there's some different presets. You can read about them. You can even add in your own presets. That's something you can do in Media Encoder. You can actually create your own presets if you have something you want to work with. But let's just say, for example, we want to work with a QuickTime movie, and we're going to work with Apple ProRes 422. I know that Adobe Premiere really likes QuickTime Movies. It works really well with QuickTime Movies, and especially this good old-fashioned Apple ProRes 422. That is a standard for how QuickTime should be. That is pretty much a gold standard of how QuickTime should be, and I know that Premiere really likes it. So I'm going to take any of my files, my MP4s, make them into QuickTime there. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to do that. And again, I'm going to take these 4 files, click, command click, command click, command click, command click, and now I'm going to right click and say import. And now my ingest settings won't just make a copy of them. The copy is really quick. That's a really easy, computer interface thing to do, is just to Control-C, Control-V, make a copy of them. But now it's going to recode them or transcode them. It's going to translate the language, the code that they're written in. So think of it like that way. It's going to convert it all to the same language, which means, again, it's going to open up Media Encoder. Media Encoder, we won't get too far into Media Encoder, but just as a resource, this is a resource. It loads these files in there, and now it's converting these files into ProRes. This might take a little bit longer because it's actually having to do some language conversion or some code conversion. So you'll notice that some of these right now say MOVs, some of them say MP4s because they haven't been converted yet. Once they're converted, then they'll say MOVs. So for a second they'll say MP4 and then they'll convert and they'll say MOVs now. Now these are here as MOVs. So they've been converted from the language that they're in into a new MOV-based structure. And I can do this with other files. So I can say, cool, I have got this goat B-roll here. I'm going to bring these and put these in this bin here. I wasn't clicked on the bin when I did this. I'm going to make another bin and call this new bin Northlands. And I'm going to say, now that I'm clicked Northlands bin, let's go to the media browser and let's go here and say, in my Adobe Media files, I'll go to this Northlands footage. And in this Northlands footage, I'll grab in some of these files here and say, cool, let's grab these 5, 6 files here. These are MXFs. Now, I know that Adobe works really well with MXFs, and these are really good quality MXFs. But I want to make sure that they're all the same file and they're all converted to the same thing because it makes me happier. Does it take up more hard drive space? Of course it does, but I just want to do it because I feel better about it. I'm going to go here and import. With this ingest setting on, it's going to import and going to bring these files in. Here it goes, open up Media Encoder again. And now it's going to bring these files to Media Encoder, and you're going to see it start to ingest. And these still say MXFs here, but now they're going to change really quick to MOVs. As soon as they're done, boom, that one's an MOV. It just did that one, it did that one. You'll see they're originally immediately referencing the MXFs, and then they'll change to MOVs as they reprocess and redo it. And you can still continue to work in Adobe Premiere if you were doing other work. Meanwhile, Media Encoder's working in the background, which is really, really nice. Here's the truth. A lot of times you're dealing with files that, say for example, Adobe Premiere just doesn't like. There's a codec we talked about with the goat footage that was an H.264. Do you know what comes after H.264? A format called H.265. H.265 is heavily, heavily compressed. It has a lot of smart temporal compression that uses something called long GOP compression, and it really does a heavy-duty job in compressing these files. It's great for making really small files. So I'm going to just show you something for a second. I'm going to turn the ingest setting off for a second, and I'm going to go to this video here. I have this video in this folder called High Res Skate. And this is some skate footage I shot with a GoPro. And this is this MP4 right here that I shot with a GoPro, and it looks like this. And I'm going to right-click and import this, and this will come in automatically. Now, this file is on my hard drive. It's here in my hard drive in this folder that I have called High Res Skate. This is some skate footage in here. I actually put it in the Northlands bin. I don't want it to be, but I'll put it outside the Northlands bin. And this footage. This footage is, let's take a look at this footage, and we're going to go to Media File Properties, and we'll look. This footage is 3840 by 2160. It is Ultra HD, what sometimes people call 4K, but it's Ultra HD, and it's also 60 frames a second, or 59.94, which is drop frame 60 frames per second there. It is using something called HEVC, High Efficiency Video Codec. High Efficiency Video Codec, also known as H.265. H.265 is super duper compressed. There was a time back in, I think, 2018, where Adobe Premiere wouldn't even accept H.265. It wouldn't accept this high-efficiency video codec. It didn't like it. And here's why. When you try to play this file in here, you'll see as I scrub through the timeline, it kind of like stutters a second. It jumps a little bit. It's like a little bit, it's not a smooth movement. As you keep going through it, it kind of gets a little bit quicker, but it almost looks like, if you ever watch like, I don't know, like a streaming service like Netflix or Hulu or something, it seems like it like stutters through and jumps through. That's because it uses that temporal compression and it's not great to edit with. But here's the thing. Here's the wonderful thing about it. If I go back here and I say reveal in Finder, I'll find this footage on my hard drive. This was a 40-second file. So it's about, I think, let's take a look. The media file is about 40 seconds long. It's in 3840 by 2160, so it's an Ultra HD 4K. It's 60 frames a second. It is 396 megabytes. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It's been compressed so small that it's 396 megabytes. That's crazy. It shouldn't be that small. It should be like, I don't know, 5 times the size of that. That's tiny. And so it's just not great. So here, we're going to reconvert this file. So we're going to say, let's do this again. But in this case, we're going to go to Media Browser, and we're going to ingest, and we're going to transcode this again to Apple ProRes. Now we bring this file, what it will do is it'll convert this file to a QuickTime movie that's not as compressed. So it'll kind of take it out of the packaging and open it up and say, let's put this thing together. It's been compressed. It's like, if you ever go, and I always use this example, if you ever go to IKEA and you buy furniture, right? You can get a whole dresser in a tiny little box that's been totally kind of compacted into all the parts. The problem? You got to put it together when you get home. And that's always the difficult part. So what this is, you know, the IKEA package in the box. What we want to do is transcode it so we convert it to an actual dresser. That way, we just have a dresser we can use. So we want Media Encoder to rebuild this as a fully large dresser. We'll say import. It'll bring this file, open up Media Encoder again, and it opens up Adobe Media Encoder, and it says, hey, I have this file. I'm going to start to transcode this. And this may take a while because it's rebuilding this IKEA furniture here, and it's rebuilding this whole thing. That's sometimes something that you might need to do because you're working with footage that is heavily compressed. I had a student of mine who was working on a film, and he shot the entire film with a series of GoPros. It was a whole thing, an hour-long thing with a series of GoPros. And he tried editing it in Adobe Premiere using GoPro settings, and GoPro uses H.265. That's the way they can make really small cameras that shoot really high-end 4K 60 frame a second video. Guess what? It really was so hard for him to edit in Adobe Premiere because it played back terribly. So this is finished now. So I had to tell my student, I had to say, hey, listen. He was like, why is this playing back so lousy? I'm like, you need to learn how to transcode. This is why we're here. So in the media browser, you can go in here and you can say, let's set the ingest settings to allow us to transcode. Some of you who work with Avid Media Composer or who've watched any of my Avid Media Composer tutorials know that Avid does this naturally. There's a setting called import, which just says, hey, I'm going to transcode this into a language, into a codec, into a format that Avid likes really well. Avid likes MXFs in the DNxHD codec. And so it's going to convert it automatically into there. Premiere doesn't do that by default. It just grabs it from wherever it is. It's really convenient because you don't have to wait for it to do that line of re-encoding and wait for it to re-encode. It'll just do it automatically, naturally. But, sorry, this is sometimes necessary. If we look at this file right now, this file here, sorry, if we reveal in Finder here, we'll see this file here is now 5.7 gigs. Remember it was 3.89 megabytes before, or 389 megabytes before? Now it's 5.73 gigs. It's a much bigger file. But guess what? That much bigger file plays back beautifully smooth. No delay, no stutter. It plays back wonderfully. If I don't drop the mouse. It plays back beautifully and has no stutter and plays back fluidly. Yeah, that's the way I want to edit. I don't want to edit with the thing dropping out or skipping or having problems. And especially that super packaged IKEA-based kind of IKEA analogy, super compressed temporal compression file like the H.265, the high efficiency video codec. Man, I don't want to have a bunch of footage that's in the high efficiency video codec and have it on timeline and then show it to a client being like, oh, let me hit play in the timeline and then play that thing and have the client be like, oh, why is this skipping and why is this looking like it's stuttering? No, I want to have a clean version. And I also want to be able to look at it in the timeline because sometimes rather than having an export version of it, you can look at the timeline and you can add markers. It's really nice to be able to look in the timeline and know that it's going to play back fluidly without any problems. That's what I want to do. So for a lot of those cases, when I have some weird formats, particularly if I'm working on a news segment, a lot of news organizations are accepting like random, people in the street shooting stuff on their iPhone. If you were at a location and you saw a bank robbery and you had some iPhone footage, great. We'll take that. We'll put that in the news because that's the only footage we have of the bank robbery. We didn't get a reporter out there in time. Fantastic. However, if you have that and you're using the iPhone, using the high efficiency video codec, which is the default for the iPhone, I would recommend somebody go in there and convert it. Hopefully you have an assistant editor or someone who can do that. A lot of news stations now have somebody who will convert all the iPhone footage, and that's like their only job is just wrangle in iPhone footage and convert it for whatever they need to. So in here, this is how you do it. This is how you do the conversion, and that's there. I will show you one other thing in Media Encoder that I do want to mention, and I don't want this to be a Media Encoder class, but I do think this is kind of cool, and we can talk about this in a couple different ideas. In Media Encoder, one of the features I like, in Media Encoder, their primary job is just convert files. And they have a whole bunch of different ways you can convert files, you can use it, and there's a bunch of presets where you can convert it. They have different presets for how different streaming services like, and how different clients like, and how different, web video, and how social media likes, and what Facebook uses, and etc. And they have all the settings there automatically, so you can take whatever file you're working with and convert it to however you want to. One of the things I really like about Media Encoder is you can just bring in files in here, drag files in here, and just convert them. So you automatically convert them. But what I really like is if you're doing a lot of this, and this is just an extra little thing, in here there's something called a watch folder. And the watch folder, we'll just delete these for a second because I'll start fresh here. The watch folder looks like this. You can create a new watch folder, and you create a watch folder, and it opens up a watch folder and says, hey, make me a folder. And I'm going to make a folder on the desktop. I'm going to call this change my stuff. And change my stuff is going to be a new folder that's going to be here. And I have this new folder right here called change my stuff. And so in here, I'm going to choose this folder. This is called change my stuff. And in here, I can say, I want to change my stuff to, and in here, I can go from an H.264, that'll make an MP4. I'm going to go to a QuickTime Movie. And a QuickTime Movie using the Apple ProRes, not the HQ, I don't need the HQ, that's a little overkill. Apple ProRes 422 will match the source and will match the width and height of the source, and will match the frame rate of the source. That'll be all fine. And you can change some things with the audio settings in here, and change things, and etc. 40 kilohertz, 16-bit, that's perfectly fine. Excellent, amazing, and now it's there. So, this is called a watch folder. Anything you put into this watch folder is going to convert into a QuickTime Movie using Apple ProRes 422. So, for example, if I have files here, and I just said, hey, I'm going to go to my Adobe Media Files folder, and I'll grab something in here like, let's say, the new phone. And I go to the new phone, and this is a QuickTime Movie. Or let's just bring something in like Goats, because we already have Goats in here. And I go to Goats here, and I say, let's bring in these clips, 5 and 6 here. And I take these files, and this is not inside Adobe Media Encoder. Adobe Media Encoder doesn't care, but Adobe Media Encoder is watching this folder. So this folder is here, has nothing in it. It has a little folder here that says output, but watch this. As I drag this in here, boom, it puts these files in there. And then Adobe Media Encoder says, oh, look, you put some files in there. And guess what? It starts to think, give it a second, hopefully it'll work. There it is, and it's now converting these files automatically. It found the files and converted the files automatically. It's going to compile file 6, and now, in Change My Stuff folder, it has made a copy of these as QuickTime Movies. So it took these source files, put them in here, and they're in here, made a copy of these files, put them in here, and made a copy automatically. So if you're doing a lot of copying, or you're working as an assistant editor, man, it's so easy to just create a watch folder that just says, hey, anything I throw in here, just convert it. You can take 100 files, convert them overnight, and just say, wake up tomorrow morning and say, hey, they're all converted, they're all in a format that I like, and everything's good and everything's wonderful, amazing in there. One thing I want to warn you about to be careful of. For example, I mentioned before that inside of here, I have this footage here that's called the new phone. And the new phone, let's take a look. The new phone is a QuickTime Movie already. And I don't even know how this is set up. We could look at Get Info and we could see what the codec is. It's using H.264, but it is a QuickTime Movie already. And I probably have some footage in here somewhere that is a QuickTime Movie that's a QuickTime Movie that's already using, that's already in the 422 codec. It's probably already there. This QuickTime Movie, Drive Home, let's see what this is in. This might be an H.264 as well. This is an H.264 as well. But if I have something and I don't want to convert it, right? I don't want to take this and convert this. If this ingest setting is on, and I go to the media browser, and if I go into the media browser and I say, hey, let's go back here and let's see, let's take a look in this footage here, and we'll go to the new phone here, and I'll go to the new phone and I'll grab in these files here. If this ingest setting is on, and this ingest setting is set to transcode, it's going to transcode this footage. It's going to take the time to transcode this footage as it is. And so if I take these files and I bring them in, and I forget, I say import, it's going to transcode. Well, what if I don't? What if I do the old-fashioned way of going here and just right-clicking and saying import and finding the footage? Guess what? It's going to transcode that as well. Well, what if I go to File Import and import the footage? It's going to transcode as well. What if I double-click in here to open up an import window and I import footage? Guess what? It's going to transcode as well. Okay, Chad, what if I grab these files in here in the Windows directory and say, let's go here, or in the interface directory, and say, let's go to the new phone, and what happens if I drag these in here? What if I just grab these two files and drag these in here? I'm just dragging them. I'm not going through the media browser. I don't even see that ingest checkbox is active. Guess what? It's going to ingest. My advice is there will be occasions where you don't want to ingest. Maybe you were playing with ingest and now you're working on something else and you're working with better footage and you're like, the footage is fine, I don't need to transcode it. Guess what? It's going to transcode the footage, whether you want to or not. And that is because in your ingest settings, that checkbox is on, it's going to ingest. And so here, in the ingest settings, the checkbox is on. If the checkbox is on, however you were previously importing footage, there's like 6, 7 different ways to import footage. However you were doing it, this is on. This is in here, in the file project settings, in the ingest settings. It says transcode this footage to Apple ProRes. It's gonna do it. My advice is if you're doing this, if you bring in a file, and I do this all the time, I'll bring in a file and I'll forget what I was doing. I was doing a demo and I'll bring in a file and just drag a file in. Man, all of a sudden Media Encoder opens up. I'm like, damn, I forgot that I was doing that, and it converted these files and made a copy of them and put them wherever. So just bear in mind that if you are working, this will make a copy of the footage, and it will make a copy of the footage if that checkbox is on. Keep an eye on that checkbox, or keep an eye on your ingest product settings. It's turning this on or off is the same thing as going in here and going to product settings, ingest, and just setting those. The setting is the same thing, so you can do that there. Anyway, that's just something to be careful of. I always run into that problem again and again because I make that mistake. All right, one final thing that I want to talk about, and again, this will get a little bit weird and a little bit technical. We're going to go back here, and I'm going to go to the media browser. And in the media browser, I'm going to look for some footage that I have here. In this footage here, this footage in here, in Level Up, this is some footage I shot at a skate park. This footage is in a format called B-RAW. This is Blackmagic RAW. Okay, this footage is really, really big. Just a note that this footage that I have here in Blackmagic RAW is some gigantic, gigantic footage. This footage, I believe, is 6K. And we're just going to link this in. We're going to turn off the ingest settings and just bring this footage in. I have to have the B-RAW plugin, so if you are working with Blackmagic's RAW format, we can just link these in. And again, I'll make a folder here. We'll make a new bin, Command B, we'll make a new bin. We'll call this Level Up Skate Footage. And I'll make sure I'm clicking this bin here, and I'm just going to link these in. And by link these in, I mean I'm not going to transcode them because the ingest setting is not on. So I'm going to bring these footage in, import these in here, and you're going to see that I have this footage here. So this footage, if I look at this in Media File Properties, let's take a look at this footage. This footage is 496 by 2160 at 24 frames a second. It is in 4K. It is in 4K. It's some big files. These are some big files. This is a this is a 28-second file. This file right here, if you look at this reveal in Finder, this is 1.36 gig. It's really big. There are some cameras that are shooting some big video right now. Let's go here, and let's make a new bin, and we'll make another new bin, and we'll call this red footage. And I have a in the media browser, I have this thing here called Red from Rick. This is shot with a red camera. Red from Rick. And I have this shot right here. And I'm going to bring that in. And we'll import that into here. This footage is in 6K. Man, this was shot with a red camera in 6K. So if you look at the media file properties, it's in 6144 by 2592 at 23.976. It's 24 seconds long. Again, if I look at this 25-second file, reveal in Finder, this file right here is coming in at 2.15 gigs. This is some huge media. Now, if I'm working on a super workstation that has tons of hard drive space and has a, super fast NVIDIA card and can do all this processing and has all this tons of memory and tons of video RAM or whatever it may be, that'll be great. But if I'm not working on the best computer in the world, I may not want to use this file. What I might want to do is I might want to use something called a proxy. So let's look at the fourth option here. I'm going to get rid of these level up files and this red footage. And we're going to go here into the media browser, and we're going to go to the ingest settings. And in the ingest settings, we're going to switch from transcode to something called create proxies. And here's how create proxies work. it's going to make a copy of this. And we can make the copy, we can say, let's make the copy full size. We don't need to do half size, we'll do full size. But we're going to make this in what's called a QuickTime proxy. And a QuickTime proxy is a much smaller file. So let's go back to this teacher training here. We'll go back here, and we'll say, okay. It's going to put in the same place as the project. We'll say, okay, and we're going to go back to this teacher training. And we'll look at these files that were really, really big. These were gigs upon gigs of files here. I'm going to grab these 3 files here, and I'll grab these 3 files. What this is going to do is it's going to make a copy, but it's going to make a super low-res copy of this. Maybe not full res, a lower quality copy of this. It might not look as good. So we're going to take these files here, we're going to right-click, and we're going to say import again. And when we do that, it brings up Adobe Media Encoder because the checkbox is on again, and it's going to make a copy of these files. So let's see what the copy looks like. It takes these files, now it's converting this file to a proxy level copy. It's making this much smaller, taking a bunch of information out, taking a lot of detail out, and it looks worse. Well, why would we want to do this? We want to do this because we can work with the proxy footage on our lesser computer. We have a laptop and we're on the train and we're just shooting we're just editing some footage that somebody shot and something. We don't want to take, a gigantic hard drive that we have to plug in or a RAID array that we have to plug in. No, we're just going to take some simple footage and bring that footage in and create a proxy. Now, I want to show you what this looks like when this is done. This is going to take a couple more seconds to make this proxy, and we'll convert to proxy. And you know what? While we're here, we'll also do this with the red footage as well, just to see what's going to happen. So we'll go in here, we'll go to Media Browser, and I'll go to this red from Rick, and I'm just going to say, hey, take this footage, this 6K footage, and man, we're just going to make a proxy of that. So we're going to go in here. The ingest setting is on, so it will make the proxy. It'll go to Media Encoder, that'll load up in there, and it starts doing the proxy level of this footage as well. So let's take a look. Okay, so this B-raw footage, we're going to take these 3 files here, because I have a bit of a mess here. We're going to take these 3 files right here, and we're going to say with these 3 files, let's just right-click and then, actually I already have a bin, so we're going to put these into a bin called Level Up, and cool, I have these in a bin. Now, if I look at these files, I am looking at the full version of these files. These are a little bit muted because they were shot in RAW, so I could put a LUT on these. We can talk about that in a different lesson, but now I have this footage there. So it could use a LUT, but it could use an input LUT, but it is what it is. It has this there, and we are looking at this footage as it is. Okay, here's the detail. With this footage, there is a button right here called Toggle Proxies. And when you toggle proxies, if that button is not there, by the way, if that button is not there, I'm going to go to the button editor, this little button over here, the button editor here, and I can actually just, this is weird. You can grab this button and just throw it off and it removes the button. The button is right here in the button editor, so if you ever need this button, it's lovely. It's lovely. Premiere made this really lovely. There's a button called Toggle Proxies, and when you go here, it goes to Toggle Proxies. You can drag this button there, and then you always have a button to toggle your proxies. We'll say okay to that. And now this will toggle proxies on. So now, right now, this is looking at the good version on my external hard drive, which is the high-end B-raw version of this. When I hit toggle proxies, it shows me the lower-end version of this with a proxy. And you might not even notice it, because here's the truth. This is a small screen, and I can watch this footage in here and see, hey, it looks good enough in here. If you were to look closer, if you were to zoom into like 400% or something like that, and you were to say, move till you saw something, this is the proxy version, the non-proxy version. You might see a difference in quality between the different versions of looking at the proxy versus the clean version. You can look at this as a proxy or a lower version. Let's look at here. I think the red footage works pretty well. Let's see if the red finished converting. So let's look at the red footage as an example. We'll bring the red footage. This is, you can see when I turn the proxy on, it looks a little bit more muted. I don't know if you can see that in the recording because you're probably watching this on YouTube, so it might not look there. But this is the full version. It looks a little bit sharper. We can go to like 200%. And you can look at something like this mountain range or something here, and you can see when you go to the proxy version, It looks a little duller. It looks a little bit less detailed, a little bit duller. But here's the truth. That's livable, especially when we're at this size. Hey, this looks like a mountain range. These look like people over here. You know, do the people look better like this or like this? It's barely noticeable. So what do? You work with the proxy level footage. And the proxy level footage doesn't look as good, but it makes a much smaller file. So here, in Media Ingest here, inside of here, I have these proxy files. So these proxy files are, again, these were these other files. This file is 440 megabytes. What was it originally? This red file, this full res red file that we had here, inside of here, this file right here was 1.9 gigabytes. 1.9 gigabytes for this file. Actually, sorry, I think it was, let's see, AA03, yeah, it was this file. This is like 2.1 gigabytes. 2.1 gigabytes, I reduced it to about 1/5 the size. About 1/5 the size. And I can still play with it and still work with it, and it's much easier to work with as a file. So now I have this singular file that's a much smaller file, and I can work with it and work with it there. I want to show you one more thing in terms of doing this. I should have done it this way before. I'm going to get rid of this file here, and we're going to go back to Media Ingest, and I'm just going to get rid of this proxy here, just to show you an extra feature that I didn't throw in there, but I will throw it in this time. So I'm going to delete this here, and we're going to bring in this red from Rick again here. Yeah, I know, it's offline. Cool. That just prompted up because I deleted a file and it was a proxy, and it still knows the proxy is there, sort of. We're going to grab this again, but in the ingest settings, here's the one thing I want to do. We're going to create a proxy, a full proxy, and then proxy watermark. This is a nice thing you can do. So we're going to do this as an idea. We're going to do a proxy icon. We're going to add a proxy icon, which is going to be just basically this icon as a watermark. So I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to import this again. So when I import this again, it's going to go to Media Encoder, which is already open, and it's going to start encoding this and going through this process. What it's going to do nice for me is going to create a watermark on this file so that I know which is the proxy version, which is the high-end version. So as it converts this file, we're going to have this file here, and this file will either be the high-end version or the proxy version, and we can look at it inside of here. We'll let this finish going on. We're going to have to wait for this. And then again, this is the difficult thing. A lot of people don't like waiting for stuff to transcode or to make proxies or to convert stuff. It is difficult and it is annoying, and they just want to bring footage in. Well, you can, but man, if you want to do this on a professional level, you're going to have to transcode some footage, especially when you're working with these cameras that are shooting higher end footage like 4K and 6K, and Blackmagic just introduced a camera that shoots in 17K. Oh my God, who needs 17K? I don't know. I guess it's the American way or the Australian way that we can just do it, so we went and did it. And so we made a 17K camera. I don't want to work with 17K footage on my laptop. I downloaded some 17K footage. It's gigantic. Man, I want to work with a low-end version of it. So here, when this is done, I have this footage here. This is the full version of this. When I click the proxy, you'll see the proxy will load up. It will load up a little watermark in there to let you know the proxy's there. Now, what's nice is that if I take this footage and I bring it into a timeline, I can bring this into a timeline. The toggle proxy button works both here and here. So there's two buttons, one on this side, one on this side. They both do the same thing. So one turns off one. So it's not like you're looking at the proxy version here and then you're looking at the full version here. This button works the same on both sides. They kind of dual active, work both ways. The way that I think about proxies is, I think about, as an analogy, and this is a weird analogy, if you were working on a movie, and say you're working on a movie with some famous celebrities, I don't know, Brad Pitt or Scarlett Johansson, and you were doing a scene where, I don't know, Scarlett Johansson is walking into the scene, and she has to walk in the scene and drink a cup of coffee. Cool. Well, before she does that, you're going to have the lighting director set up the lighting and set up, and the camera and the DP is going to set up the camera, and everyone's going to set up in the scene, and the boom operator is going to be making sure the microphone's in the right place, and the lights are going to be perfect, and the set designer is going to be doing all things. And now you want to do a couple practices of this. So you want to do like 20 or 30 practices to make sure the light is right, and you're fixing things, you're tweaking things. And now you need to have Scarlett Johansson walk into the room 20 or 30 times. Well, you don't want to make Scarlett Johansson do that. She's worth tons of money, and she's making millions of dollars on this movie, and she's sitting in her trailer, and you don't want to have to ask her to come out of her trailer to walk back and forth while you tweak a barn door and a light. No, what do? You get a stand-in. You get someone who looks roughly the same height and the same shape and build as Scarlett Johansson or Brad Pitt or whatever celebrity you want to insert there, and you say, hey, we're going to pay you minimum wage to walk back into the room and out of the room and into the room and out of the room and look so we can put the lights in the right place and we can put the sound in the right place and we can have the set look just the way we want to do it. We're going to have a practice person. And then when they know that they're ready and the shoot is perfect and everything's exactly what it's supposed to be, then they're going to knock on Scarlett's, trailer door and say, hey, you can come out now and only do this once because you're perfect and you're going to do this in one take. That's what a proxy is. So a lot of times you're working with this 4K, 6K, 12K footage. You don't want to work with the high-end footage because it's gigs upon gigs and it takes up all this hard drive space and you can't work on your laptop and you can't and it's really hard to play through and it's taking up all this bandwidth to work with. No, you work with low-end proxy versions. And here in Media Encoder, you could say, hey, let's make a watch folder, another watch folder. We'll call this on the desktop, we'll call this one new folder celeb stand-in. It's a bad name for it, but here, and use this folder. This is going to be the people that stand in for the files. And so we're going to go in here and we'll make a QuickTime movie again. We'll stick with a QuickTime movie and we'll make a QuickTime movie, except this time we're going to use the video preset of Apple ProRes Proxy. And maybe we just want it to be 1920 by 1080. Even if it was 6K, we're just going to work with the 1920 by 1080 version. And so what we do here is we make that watch folder, boom, and it makes that watch folder. And we have this celeb stand-in watch folder. And then anything we put in there, it just automatically makes a proxy version of this. And we have the proxy version ready to go. You can do this inside of Premiere. It'll still use Media Encoder, or you can create a watch folder if you're just doing this for tons and tons of footage. But this is that nice thing that you can work in here and you can add effects and you can color correct and it looks, it doesn't look as good as the red footage, but it looks okay enough that you can work with it. And then when you're ready to export, turn the proxies off and export it. And now you're working with the high-end footage. So it's basically just saying, originally I'm pointing at this folder here, my Media Ingest folder, for example, that has my proxies. These are my proxies in here. They're in my Media Ingest folder. I could put them in a special folder if I wanted to, but they're in here and it's pointing my proxies. And then when I'm ready to export and I'm ready to finish the system, and this is what some people refer to as the offline versus online process of offline, kind of in the offline mentality. You're just kind of putting this together. You're kind of working this together. You haven't color corrected this footage yet. You haven't ready for finishing, people will say. And then at the very end, you say, okay, now we're going to do the color correction and we're going to make this picture lock on a high-end version of this. So now we want to work this on online. And so they change their hats and they say, great, now we're doing this online. So we're going to do this with the intent of finishing as opposed to just coming up with a rough draft of how the edit is going to look with these low-res copies of this footage. If you're working seriously as an editor, you've got to learn about transcoding and you've got to learn about creating proxies. It is something that people who work professionally ask me all the time. How do you transcode in Premiere? How do you transcode and how do you make proxies in Premiere? And how do you do a proxy workflow in Premiere? We need to understand the proxy workflow. That's how professionals work with assistant editors and how they work in setting up their footage and doing their media management. It's important. So it's more than just bringing the files in and just working with them. No, man, a lot of times you got to convert these files and understand what all the conversion is and understand even with transcoding or with making copies what MD5 verification is, which I still struggle with. Anyway, that's something you can do. I'm going to turn this checkbox off because I don't want to run into this project again and then say, oh, I left the ingest settings on, and then Media Encoder is opening up again. Ugh. So we'll do it. I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. We'll talk about some other cool things in future lessons, but I just wanted to cover that because when we first talked about bringing footage in, we didn't get really into the nerdiness of it and talk about ingesting. All right. Have a good time. Hope you have some fun editing, and I hope maybe you learned something. Cool. I'll see you guys around.